The Valdorian Empire stretched across 3,000 star systems, its crystal ships gliding through space like deadly jewels. For 5,000 years, they had ruled the galaxy with an iron fist wrapped in technological superiority. Every species knew their place in the grand hierarchy, and no one dared to question it. Admiral Zexthor stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Crystal Majesty, watching the stars drift by through the transparent aluminum viewport. His forearms moved gracefully as he reviewed the daily reports, his crystalline skin catching the light from the ship's bioluminescent panels. The bridge hummed with quiet efficiency, a testament to Valdorian engineering excellence. "Sir," came a voice from the communications officer, a young Valdorian named Creven. "We have received the monthly intelligence briefings from the outer sectors." Zexthor's primary eyes focused on the holographic display that materialized before him. The galaxy map showed the familiar color coding that had remained unchanged for centuries. The bright blue zones represented Valdorian space, naturally occupying the galaxy's most resource-rich regions. The green areas belonged to their closest allies, the Thex Collective, whose biomechanical ships served as the Empire's secondary fleet. Below them were the yellow zones of the mid-tier species like the Corvin Engineers and the Zephyr Traders. These races had proven useful enough to earn limited autonomy, though they still answered to Valdorian authority. Their ships were primitive compared to Valdorian crystal technology, but functional enough for their assigned roles. At the bottom of the hierarchy were the red zones, home to dozens of barely spacefaring species. Most of these races had only recently discovered faster-than-light travel, and their crude metal ships barely qualified as space vessels in Valdorian opinion. "And what news from the red zones?" Zexthor asked, his voice carrying the bored tone of someone discussing routine maintenance. Criven's expression shifted slightly. "There have been some unusual reports from the human sectors, sir. They claim to be working on new ship designs." A ripple of amusement passed through the bridge crew. The humans were one of the youngest spacefaring species, having only achieved FTL travel 300 years ago. Their ships were blocky, inefficient things made of metal and ceramic, powered by primitive fusion reactors. They were useful for mining operations and grunt labor, but hardly worth serious attention. "New designs?" Zexthor chuckled, a sound like wind chimes in a gentle breeze. "Let me guess. They have discovered how to make their metal boxes slightly less ugly?" "The reports are vague, sir," Criven replied, consulting his datapad. "Human officials refuse to provide detailed specifications. They claim their new vessels are still in the experimental phase." Zexthor waved two of his hands dismissively. "Humans and their experiments. Remember their attempt at bioship technology 5 years ago? They managed to create a vessel that was somehow less efficient than their metal ones." The bridge crew shared in the quiet laughter. The human bioship experiment had become something of a joke throughout the Empire. The humans had tried to copy Thex technology, but had failed so spectacularly that their prototype had barely made it out of their home system before breaking down. "They are persistent, if nothing else," commented his tactical officer, a veteran, named Hexandra. "Their failure rate would have discouraged any sensible species centuries ago." This was true. Humans had an unusual approach to technology that baffled most other species. Where other races would perfect a design through careful calculation and testing, humans seemed to throw random ideas together and hope for the best. Their ships were covered in external modifications, jury-rigged systems, and what they called upgrades that usually made things worse. "It is almost admirable in its futility," Zexthor mused. "They refuse to accept their limitations." He called up the detailed files on human space capabilities. Their largest ships were barely half a kilometer long, tiny compared to the 5-kilometer crystal dreadnoughts of the Valdorian fleet. Human vessels couldn't even generate proper energy shields, instead relying on thick metal armor that any decent plasma cannon could slice through like paper. Their weapons were equally primitive. While Valdorian ships mounted reality distortion, cannons and quantum disruption beams, humans still used projectile weapons and basic energy blasters. In simulated combat scenarios, a single Valdorian frigate could easily destroy an entire human fleet. "Have they made any requests for technological assistance?" Zexthor asked. "No, sir. In fact, they have declined our last 3 offers to upgrade their drives and weapons systems." This was another peculiarity of humans. Most species eagerly accepted Valdorian technology transfers, even if it meant acknowledging their inferior status. Humans, however, seemed determined to develop everything themselves, no matter how inefficient the result. "Pride, perhaps," suggested Hexandra. "Some species find it difficult to admit their inadequacy." Zexthor nodded. He had seen it before in younger species. They would spend decades trying to reinvent basic technologies rather than simply adopt proven Valdorian designs. Eventually, reality would force them to accept help. But humans seemed particularly stubborn. The intelligence briefing continued with reports from other sectors. The Corvin engineers had completed their new mining station ahead of schedule. The Zephyr traders had opened 3 new commercial routes. The Thex Collective was conducting routine military exercises near the Galactic Rim. Everything was proceeding according to plan. The Empire functioned like a vast, well-oiled machine, with each species playing their assigned role. The Valdorians provided technology and leadership. The Thex maintained order and security. The mid-tier species handled specialized tasks like engineering and trade. The bottom-tier species provided raw materials and basic labor. It was a system that had brought peace and prosperity to the galaxy for thousands of years. Sure, some species grumbled about their position, but the benefits of Imperial protection far outweighed any complaints. Pirates were virtually extinct. Wars between species had ended. Trade flowed freely along protected routes. "Sir?" Criven interrupted his thoughts. "There is one more item in the human reports. They have requested permission to send an exploration vessel through Valdorian space." Zexthor's attention snapped back to the briefing. "Exploration? To where?" "They wish to survey the Andromeda Spiral, sir. They claim it is for peaceful scientific research." The bridge fell silent. The Andromeda Spiral was deep in Valdorian territory, a region rich in rare minerals and exotic energy sources. No non-Valdorian ship had been permitted in that sector for over 1,000 years. "Absolutely not," Zexthor said firmly. "Send the standard reply. Lower-tier species are restricted to their designated patrol zones." "Already done, sir. However, they have submitted a formal diplomatic protest, claiming the right to free passage under the Galactic Navigation Treaty." Zexthor's skin darkened with annoyance. The Navigation Treaty was an ancient document, created in the early days of the Empire when borders were still being established. It did technically guarantee certain navigation rights, but no one had invoked it in centuries. "They are testing boundaries," Hexandra observed. "Perhaps they need a reminder of their place in the hierarchy." Zexthor considered this. Humans had been growing increasingly bold in recent years. They had expanded their territory, established new colonies, and even begun trading directly with other species without Imperial oversight. A firm reminder might be necessary. "Monitor their sectors closely," he ordered. "If they attempt to send any vessels into restricted space, we will intercept them. It is time the humans learned that the Empire's patience has limits." As the briefing concluded and the crew returned to their duties, Zexthor remained at the viewport, watching the stars. The Empire had faced challenges before, and it had always emerged stronger. A few upstart humans with their primitive ships posed no real threat to 5,000 years of Valdorian dominance. Soon, the humans would learn their place, just as every other species had before them. 3 weeks later, the human ship appeared on the edge of Valdorian space like a bad joke. Admiral Zexthor was finishing his morning meditation when the alarms began to sound throughout the Crystal Majesty. he rushed to the bridge, his arms adjusting his ceremonial robes as he moved. "Report," he commanded as he took his position at the center of the bridge. "Sir, we have detected a human vessel approximately 2 light hours from the Andromeda Spiral entrance," Criven announced, his voice tight with confusion. "They are broadcasting standard peaceful approach signals." Zexthor's primary eyes focused on the main display. The ship that appeared on screen was unlike anything he had seen before. It was still clearly human in design, with their characteristic preference for function over beauty, but something was different. The vessel was roughly cylindrical, about 800 meters long, with a dull gray hull that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. "What class of vessel is that?" he demanded. The science officer, a methodical Valdorian named Quintel, ran her instruments over the ship. "The database shows no match, sir. The humans are calling it the UES Prometheus. They classify it as an high exploration vessel." "Exploration?" Hexandra snorted. "It looks more like a cargo hauler. Ugly even by human standards." Zexthor studied the ship more carefully. There was something odd about its energy signature. Most human ships produced a steady, predictable pattern of fusion emissions and electromagnetic radiation. This vessel's signature flickered and shifted in ways that made no sense. "Are their engines malfunctioning?" he asked. Quintel frowned at her readings. "I do not believe so, sir. The patterns are too regular to be random failures. It is almost as if they are using multiple different drive systems simultaneously. That was impossible, of course. Even the most advanced Valdorian ships used a single primary propulsion method, supplemented by maneuvering thrusters. Multiple main drives would interfere with each other and tear the ship apart. "Hail them," Zexthor ordered. The main screen shifted to show the bridge of the human vessel. The sight was jarring in its primitive simplicity. Where Valdorian bridges were works of art, with flowing crystal interfaces and bioluminescent displays, the human bridge looked like the inside of a metal box. Flat screens covered the walls, connected by thick cables and blinking lights. The crew wore simple uniforms and sat in basic chairs. At the center sat a human female with graying hair and tired eyes. She looked like she had not slept in days, but her expression was alert and determined. This was clearly the captain. "I am Admiral Zexthor of the Valdorian Imperial Fleet," he announced in the formal manner required by diplomatic protocol. "You are in violation of Imperial Navigation Decree 2847. You must return to your designated patrol zone immediately." The human captain smiled, an expression that Zexthor found difficult to read. Human facial expressions were often confusing to other species. "Greetings, Admiral," she replied in accented but fluent Valdorian. "I am Captain Sarah Chen of the United Earth Ship Prometheus. We appreciate your concern, but we are exercising our rights under the Galactic Navigation Treaty. We intend no harm and request safe passage to conduct peaceful scientific research." Zexthor felt his skin darken with irritation. "The treaty does not apply to restricted military zones. You will turn around now, or we will escort you back by force." Captain Chen's smile did not waver. "With respect, Admiral, our legal department disagrees with your interpretation. We have submitted our navigation plan to the Imperial Court and are awaiting their ruling. Until then, we intend to proceed with our mission." The audacity was breathtaking. No lower-tier species had challenged Imperial authority so directly in centuries. Zexthor looked around his bridge and saw his crew watching him expectantly. A firm response was clearly needed. "Captain Chen," he said slowly, letting authority fill his voice, "I have 3 cruisers and a squadron of fighters at my disposal. Your single ship is no match for Imperial firepower. Do not force us to demonstrate the consequences of defying the Empire." For the first time, Captain Chen's expression grew serious. "Admiral, I understand your position, but we have our orders. We will not fire first, but we will defend ourselves if attacked. I hope it does not come to that." The transmission ended. leaving the bridge in tense silence. Zexthor had been in command for over a century and had never encountered such brazen disrespect from a lower-tier species. The humans were clearly counting on Imperial reluctance to start a shooting war over a single exploration ship. "Sir?" Hexandra asked quietly. "Your orders?" Zexthor considered his options. A direct attack on a peaceful vessel would require extensive paperwork and might cause diplomatic complications. However, allowing the humans to proceed would set a dangerous precedent. Other species might begin challenging Imperial authority if they thought they could get away with it. "Launch 2 fighters," he decided. "Have them escort the human ship away from the restricted zone. If they refuse to comply, disable their engines with minimal force." The fighters launched smoothly from the Crystal Majesty's hangar bays. They were beautiful craft, shaped like flying crystals with energy wings that trailed rainbow light. Each fighter was crewed by a single pilot and carried enough firepower to destroy a human frigate. Zexthor watched on the main screen as the fighters approached the human vessel. They took positions on either side of the Prometheus and began. Broadcasting returned to base orders on all frequencies. The human ship continued on its course without any change in speed or direction. "Fighters report no response to their signals," Criven announced. "Very well," Zexthor sighed. "Authorize them to fire warning shots across the human bow." The fighters moved into attack position and fired their plasma cannons. Brilliant blue energy beams lanced through space, passing just meters from the human ship's hull. It was a clear message that could not be misunderstood. Then something impossible happened. The human ship simply was not there anymore. Zexthor blinked, wondering if his eyes had malfunctioned. On the screen, the Prometheus had vanished completely. The fighters were firing at empty space, their plasma beams continuing harmlessly into the void. "What happened?" he demanded. Quintel was frantically checking her instruments. "Sir, the human vessel has completely disappeared from all sensors. No hyperspace signature, no energy trail, nothing." "That is impossible. Ships do not just vanish." "Wait," Quintel called out. "I am detecting it again. Distance 50,000 kilometers. Bearing 27 Mark 8. The main screen swiveled to show the new position. There was the Prometheus, looking exactly the same as before, continuing on its original heading as if nothing had happened. "How did they get there?" Hexandra whispered. No one had an answer. Even the fastest Valdorian ships needed several minutes to cover 50,000 kilometers, and that was at maximum acceleration. The human vessel had somehow crossed that distance instantaneously without any detectable energy expenditure. Could it be some kind of cloaking device? Zexthor asked. Weakly, Quintel shook her head. "No, sir. Cloaking only hides a ship from sensors. This vessel actually moved. Space-time sensors confirm it changed position." Zexthor felt a cold sensation in his chest that he had not experienced since his first combat mission centuries ago. Fear. The humans had just demonstrated a technology that the Empire did not understand, could not explain, and had no defense against. On the screen, the human ship continued peacefully toward the Andromeda spiral, leaving two very confused fighter pilots trying to figure out what had just happened. Captain Chen's voice came over the communication channel, sounding perfectly calm. "Admiral, I hope your pilots are unhurt. Our navigation systems are still calibrating, so our movements might seem a bit unpredictable. We appreciate your patience while we work out the bugs." The transmission ended, leaving Zexthor staring at a ship that should not exist, using technology that should not be possible, operated by a species that should not be capable of such things. For the first time in his long career, Admiral Zexthor did not know what to do. Admiral Zexthor called for reinforcements. Within 6 hours, half of the Third Fleet had arrived at the intercept point, including the massive dreadnought Empire's Will and 2 support carriers. What had started as a routine patrol action had become the largest Imperial military gathering in decades. The human ship continued its leisurely course toward the Andromeda spiral, apparently unconcerned by the growing fleet arrayed against it. Captain Chen had politely acknowledged each new arrival with cheerful greetings and offers to share star charts, as if she were hosting a friendly meeting rather than facing down the Empire's finest warships. Zexthor stood in the war room of the Crystal Majesty, surrounded by his senior officers and the newly arrived fleet commanders. Holographic displays showed tactical analyses, energy readings, and increasingly desperate theories about human technology. "The science teams have been working around the clock," reported Chief Science Officer Vex Tala, an elderly Valdorian whose expertise was respected throughout the fleet. "We have reached some disturbing conclusions." The room fell silent. Vexatala was not given to dramatic statements, and her worried tone sent ripples of concern through the assembled officers. "The human vessel appears to be using technology based on quantum probability manipulation," she continued. "Instead of moving through space in the traditional sense, they seem to be selecting alternate probability states where they exist in different locations." Admiral Colvon of the Empire's Will scoffed. "That is science fiction, not science. Probability manipulation is theoretical at best." "I thought so too," Vextala replied grimly. "But observe this. The holographic display showed a recording of the Prometheus from multiple angles. As they watched, the ship began to flicker, becoming translucent for brief moments. During these phases, the ship appeared to exist in several positions simultaneously, like a ghost image spread across space." "It gets worse," Vexatala continued. "Our deep scan probes have detected quantum fluctuations around the vessel that suggest it is not entirely in our reality. Parts of the ship exist in parallel dimensions, which explains how it can phase through solid matter." To demonstrate, she showed footage of a probe attempting to approach the human ship. The small reconnaissance device had passed directly through the Prometheus hull as if it were not there, emerging on the other side completely unharmed. "This is impossible," breathed Admiral Telmax of the Second Carrier Group. "No species has ever achieved dimensional manipulation on this scale." "The humans have," Vextala said simply. "And there is more. Analysis of their energy signatures suggests they are drawing power from sources we cannot identify. Their reactor output is insufficient to power the systems we are observing, which means they must be tapping into something else." Fleet Commander Yaztor, the senior officer present, leaned forward in his chair. "Are you saying they have discovered new energy sources?" "Possibly, or they are accessing existing sources in ways we do not understand. Our instruments detect sporadic bursts of what appears to be dark matter conversion, but the processes involved are beyond our current theoretical framework." The implications were staggering. The Empire's technological superiority was based on thousands of years of careful scientific advancement. The idea that a primitive species could leapfrog millennia of development was fundamentally disturbing. "What about their weapons?" Admiral Colvon asked. Vextala's expression grew even more troubled. "We have detected no conventional weapon systems. However, there are energy patterns that suggest they have devices capable of manipulating matter at the quantum level. If our analysis is correct, they could theoretically edit the atomic structure of our ships without firing a shot." The room erupted in shocked whispers. Quantum matter manipulation was the stuff of theoretical physics papers, not practical weapons technology. Even the Empire's most advanced reality distortion cannons only affected energy patterns and gravitational fields. "How is this possible?" Fleet Commander Yaztor demanded. "Our intelligence reports show humans using primitive fusion drives and projectile weapons just months ago." "I have been reviewing human scientific literature," Vextala admitted. "Their approach to research is highly unusual. Where we follow careful, logical progression from proven principles, humans seem to randomly experiment with ideas that should not work. They have published papers on impossible theories, failed experiments that somehow produced useful results, and research based on what they call hunches, rather than mathematical proofs." "Chaos research," Admiral Telmax muttered. No wonder. Their technology makes no sense. Admiral Zexthor had been quiet during the briefing, but now he spoke up. We need to understand their capabilities before deciding how to proceed. Open a channel to Captain Chen. The main screen shifted to show the human bridge. Captain Chen looked even more tired than before, but she still managed a warm smile when she saw the assembled Imperial officers. Admiral Zexthor, what a pleasant surprise. I see you have brought friends. Are we having a party? The casual tone was infuriating. Here was a representative of a bottom-tier species, surrounded by the Empire's most powerful warships, and she was making jokes. Captain Chen, Zexthor began formally, your vessel is displaying capabilities that our science teams find difficult to explain. Would you be willing to share information about your propulsion and defense systems? Captain Chen's smile widened. Of course, Admiral. We are always happy to discuss our work. The Prometheus is equipped with our latest probability drive system, quantum consciousness interface, and dimensional phase shields. We also have a small dark matter converter for backup power. She said it as casually as someone describing the weather. The Imperial officers exchanged shocked glances. These were technologies that existed only in theoretical papers, if at all. Could you explain how these systems work? Vexitala asked, leaning into the camera pickup. Well, the probability drive calculates all possible locations we could occupy. Within a given space-time region, then simply selects the one we prefer, Captain Chen explained cheerfully. The quantum consciousness interface lets us think the ship into different states of existence. The phase shields shift us between dimensional layers to avoid incoming attacks. She paused thoughtfully. The dark matter converter is still experimental. We built it based on some theoretical work by Dr. Martinez back on Earth. He thought it might be possible to extract energy from the quantum foam, so we decided to try it. Took us 3 attempts to get it working properly. 3 attempts? Admiral Colvan sputtered. You created a dark matter converter through trial and error? Pretty much, Captain Chen admitted. We are not sure why it works, but the results speak for themselves. Dr. Martinez says understanding can come later, as long as we take proper safety precautions. The Imperial officers sat in stunned silence. The humans had casually built technologies that the Empire's greatest scientists considered impossible, and they had done it without understanding the underlying principles. Captain, Fleet Commander Yaztor said slowly, what classification of vessel is the Prometheus? Is it your most advanced warship? Captain Chen laughed, a sound that sent chills down Valdorian spines. Oh no, Admiral. The Prometheus is just a research ship. We built it to test some new ideas and explore interesting places. Our military vessels are quite different. Different how? Zexthor asked, though he was not sure he wanted to know the answer. Well, they are designed for combat, rather than exploration, Captain Chen replied matter-of-factly. They have proper weapons systems, enhanced defensive measures, and crew members trained for fighting rather than scientific research. This ship only has a research team and some graduate students. She gestured around her bridge, where Zexthor could now see that many of the crew members were indeed very young, barely more than children by Imperial standards. We have been documenting some fascinating quantum phenomena during our journey, Captain Chen continued enthusiastically. Would you like to see our preliminary data? We think we may have found evidence of parallel universe bleed-through in this region. The transmission ended, leaving the Imperial command staff staring at each other in horror. The most advanced human vessel they had ever encountered was crewed by students and built for research. And somewhere in human space, there were ships, designed for war. Fleet Commander Yaztor was the first to break the silence. We need to contact Imperial Command immediately. This changes everything. The emergency session of the Imperial High Council convened within 12 hours of Fleet Commander Yaztor's report. For the first time in 3 centuries, every member of the ruling council gathered in the crystal chambers of the capital world. The news of the human vessel had spread through imperial channels like wildfire, causing panic from the highest levels of government down to local administrators. Emperor Valdos himself presided over the session, his ancient form seated on the throne of stars. At over 2,000 years old, he had ruled the empire through countless crises. But the deep lines of worry on his crystalline features showed that this situation was unlike any he had faced before. "Show me the data again," he commanded, his voice carrying the weight of absolute authority. The massive holographic display in the center of the chamber came to life, showing recordings of the Prometheus in action. The assembled council members watched in horrified silence as the human ship phased through solid matter, disappeared and reappeared at will, and casually ignored the Empire's most advanced weapons. Science Counselor Mex Tara, the Empire's highest-ranking researcher, had spent the night analyzing the reports. Her presentation painted a picture that shook the foundations of Imperial confidence. "The humans have achieved technological capabilities that we considered impossible," she reported. "Their vessel operates using principles that contradict our understanding of physics. More importantly, they claim this is merely a research ship, not a military vessel." Defense Counselor Korvac, a massive Valdorian with scars from the ancient border wars, slammed one of his 4 fists on his chair. "Impossible or not, they are still just one ship. Even with their strange abilities, they cannot stand against the entire Imperial fleet." "Can they not?" Emperor Valdos asked quietly. "Tell me, Counselor, how do you destroy a ship that can exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously? How do you target something that can rewrite probability itself?" The question hung in the air like a death sentence. The Empire's military might was built on overwhelming firepower and superior technology. Against an enemy that could simply choose not to be hit, traditional tactics were useless. Intelligence Counselor Zalveth cleared her throat. "Your Majesty, we have been monitoring human communications since the incident. The intelligence we have gathered is deeply disturbing." She activated her own holographic display, showing intercepted transmissions and data fragments. "The humans are discussing this encounter as a minor training exercise. Their communications indicate that the Prometheus crew consists largely of university students and junior researchers. The captain herself is described as a retired explorer rather than a military officer." "Students?" Military Counselor Dex Mirren leaned forward in disbelief. "They sent students to face our Third Fleet?" "It appears so. More concerning are the references to other human projects. We have detected mentions of vessels called reality anchors, ships that can exist outside causality, and something they refer to as universe seeds. The context suggests these are not theoretical concepts, but actual operational craft." Emperor Valdos felt a chill that had nothing to do with the chamber's temperature. The Empire had maintained control through technological superiority for millennia. If the humans had developed capabilities that rendered Imperial technology obsolete, the entire galactic order was at risk. "What about their population and industrial capacity?" he asked. Economic Counselor Velnara consulted her datapad. "Human space encompasses approximately 400 star systems with a total population of roughly 12 billion. Their industrial output is classified as mid-level for a spacefaring species. However, these numbers may be misleading given their apparent technological capabilities." 12 billion, Emperor Valdos mused. "The Empire governs over 2 trillion beings across 3,000 systems. By all conventional measures, they should pose no threat." "Conventional measures may no longer apply, Your Majesty," Science Counselor Mex Tara interjected. "If humans can manipulate reality itself, traditional assessments of military strength become meaningless." The council chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. The Empire's power structure was built on a carefully maintained hierarchy where technological advancement determined political status. The Valdorians sat at the top because their crystal technology was superior to everyone else's. The Thex Collective held second place due to their biomechanical expertise. Each species knew their role and accepted their limitations. But humans had just shattered that entire system by building the impossible. There is another concern, Intelligence Counselor Zalveth continued reluctantly. Our deep space monitoring stations have detected anomalous readings from human space. Energy signatures unlike anything in our databases, gravitational distortions that suggest massive construction projects, and quantum fluctuations that indicate large-scale manipulation of spacetime itself. Construction projects? Defense Counselor Korovak demanded. What kind of construction? Unknown. The scale appears to be enormous, possibly involving entire star systems. Our long-range sensors cannot penetrate whatever screening technology they are using, but the secondary effects are detectable from hundreds of light-years away. Emperor Valdos closed his primary eyes and tried to imagine what kind of projects could affect space-time on such a scale. The Empire's greatest engineering achievements included artificial planets and stellar conversion facilities, but nothing that could distort reality across multiple star systems. Are they building weapons? He asked. We do not know, Your Majesty. The readings could indicate anything from massive industrial complexes to experiments in fundamental physics. Given their apparent disregard for natural laws, any speculation could be correct. Foreign Relations Counselor Pixandra, who had remained silent during most of the briefing, finally spoke up. Your Majesty, we must consider the political implications. Word of this incident is already spreading through the lower-tier species. Several have submitted requests for reclassification of their status, claiming that the old hierarchy no longer applies. This was the nightmare scenario that every imperial leader feared. The Empire's stability depended on the acceptance of Valdorian superiority. If other species began to question that superiority, the entire system could collapse. How many requests? Emperor Valdos asked. 17 so far, with more expected. The Corvan engineers have demanded immediate elevation to top-tier status. The Zephyr traders are threatening to withdraw from imperial trade agreements. Even some of our closer allies are asking pointed questions about human capabilities. Madhava, domino effect was already beginning. If the Empire could not maintain its position as the galaxy's supreme technological power, other species would start jockeying for position. Wars could break out as old grievances resurfaced and new alliances formed. What do we know about human intentions? Emperor Valdos asked. Are they planning to challenge imperial authority directly? Intelligence Counselor Zalveth shook her head. Surprisingly, no. Their communication suggests they are primarily interested in exploration and research. They seem genuinely puzzled by our concern over their vessel. In their view, they are simply exercising legitimate navigation rights. They do not see themselves as a threat, Science Counselor Mextara added. From their perspective, they are just curious researchers poking around the galaxy. They appear unaware of the impact their technology is having on imperial stability. This was almost worse than outright hostility. An enemy could be fought, negotiated with, or contained. But how could the Empire deal with a species that was accidentally dismantling the galactic order simply by existing? Options, Emperor Valdos asked grimly. Defense Counselor Korvac straightened in his chair. We could launch a preemptive strike against human space, destroy their industrial capacity before they can build more impossible ships. With what? Science Counselor Mextara challenged. If their research vessel can phase through our attacks, what makes you think their military ships will be more vulnerable? We could try diplomatic contact, Foreign Relations Counselor Pixandra suggested. Perhaps we can negotiate some kind of technology-sharing agreement. And admit our inferiority? Defense Counselor Korvac snarled. The Empire does not beg for scraps from primitive species. Emperor Valdos raised one hand for silence. All options carry enormous risks. A military attack could trigger a war we cannot win. Diplomatic overtures could be seen as weakness by our current allies, and doing nothing allows the situation to deteriorate further. He stood from the throne of stars, his ancient joints creaking audibly in the silent chamber. For 2,000 years, he had guided the empire through its golden age. Now he faced the possibility that everything they had built was about to crumble. We need more information, he decided. Triple our intelligence-gathering efforts in human space. I want to know everything about their capabilities, their intentions, and their weaknesses. Until we understand what we are dealing with, we cannot make informed decisions. The council members nodded gravely, but Emperor Valdos could see the fear in their eyes. For the first time in Imperial history, they were facing an unknown that might be beyond their ability to comprehend or control. As the session ended and the councilors filed out, Emperor Valdos. 6 months later, the galaxy had fundamentally changed. The UES Prometheus had completed its peaceful survey mission and returned to human space, leaving behind a trail of impossible scientific data and a political crisis that threatened to tear the Empire apart. Admiral Zexthor stood in his quarters aboard the Crystal Majesty, staring out at a fleet that now seemed like a collection of museum pieces. The intelligence reports covering his desk painted a picture of a universe where everything he had believed about power and technology had become obsolete. The humans had not stopped with one impossible ship. Over the past months, reconnaissance, drones had detected dozens of vessels emerging from human space, each one demonstrating capabilities that redefined what was possible. There were ships that existed in 11 dimensions simultaneously, vessels that could convert dark matter into usable energy, and most terrifying of all, craft that seemed to operate outside the normal flow of time. A soft chime announced the arrival of a priority message. The holographic display activated to show Emperor Valdos himself, his ancient features showing signs of the strain that the past months had brought. "Admiral," the Emperor began without preamble, "I am calling an end to our military posture toward human space. Effective immediately, all Imperial forces are to stand down and adopt a defensive position." Zexthor felt his skin darken with shock. "Your Majesty, if we show weakness now—" "Weakness?" Emperor Valdos interrupted. "Admiral, we passed the point of strength or weakness months ago. Let me share some information that has only just reached the capital." The display shifted to show surveillance footage from the edge of human territory. What Zexthor saw defied every natural law he understood. A human construction project was taking place around a yellow star, but instead of building space stations or orbital platforms, they were actually modifying the star itself. Streams of solar matter were being redirected, contained, and shaped into complex geometric patterns that pulsed with controlled fusion energy. "They are building a Dyson sphere," Emperor Valdos explained, "but not just any Dyson sphere. Our science teams believe they are creating a computational matrix that uses an entire star as a processing core. The energy output would be sufficient to power technologies that we cannot even imagine." Zexthor watched in horrified fascination as the star's output was channeled through crystalline structures that materialized from what appeared to be empty space. The engineering involved was so far beyond Imperial capabilities that it might as well have been magic. "That is not the worst part," Emperor Valdos continued. 3 days ago, our deep space monitoring station detected something that should not exist. A human vessel appeared to travel from one star system to another without crossing the space in between. Not through hyperspace or any form of FTL we understand, but by somehow moving directly through what our physicists can only describe as conceptual space. The Emperor's image leaned forward, and Zexthor could see the weight of defeat in his ancient eyes. "Admiral, we are no longer dealing with a technologically advanced species. We are dealing with a race that has transcended the normal rules of reality. They can build the impossible, travel through concepts rather than space, and reshape matter at the quantum level while treating it as a casual weekend project." Over the past months, the political situation had deteriorated exactly as feared. 17 species had formally withdrawn from imperial control, declaring themselves independent and demanding direct diplomatic relations with humanity. The Thex Collective had begun reverse engineering human technologies, with limited success, but enough progress to make them question their alliance with the Valdorians. Most disturbing of all, intercepted human communications suggested that they remained, largely oblivious to the chaos they were causing. Their exploration ships continued to make peaceful contact with various species, sharing scientific data and offering technical assistance with the casual generosity of people who had more than they could possibly use. "What are your orders?" "Your Majesty?" Zexthor asked wearily. "We are going to do something the Empire has never done before," Emperor Valdos replied. "We are going to ask for help." The words hung in the air like a death sentence for everything the Empire represented. For 5,000 years, the Valdorians had been the ones offering technological assistance to lesser species. The idea of reversing that relationship was fundamentally humiliating. "I have authorized diplomatic overtures to the human government," Emperor Valdos continued. "We will request a formal meeting to discuss technological cooperation and peaceful coexistence. We will also offer to share our own knowledge in exchange for access to their research." Zexthor understood the implications. The Empire was essentially surrendering its position as the galaxy's dominant technological power and asking to be treated as an equal by a species they had dismissed as primitive just months before. "There is one more thing," Emperor Valdos added, grimly. "Our intelligence sources have detected references to something the humans call the Project. The details are classified beyond our ability to penetrate, but the scale appears to be galactic. Energy readings suggest they are manipulating space-time across multiple sectors simultaneously." "What kind of project requires galactic-scale engineering?" Zexthor asked, though he dreaded the answer. "Unknown. Our best analysts believe they may be attempting to connect parallel universes, create artificial realities, or perhaps build something that exists outside our normal dimensions entirely. Given their demonstrated capabilities, any of these possibilities could be accurate." The transmission ended, leaving Zexthor alone with reports that chronicled the end of everything he had believed about the universe. The empire that had ruled the galaxy for millennia was now a second-tier power, relegated to begging for scraps of knowledge from a species that treated reality like modeling clay. A month later, the formal diplomatic mission arrived at the human, capital world of Earth. The imperial delegation, led by Foreign Relations Counselor Pixandra, was greeted with the same cheerful hospitality that Captain Chen had shown during their first encounter. The humans were genuinely delighted to meet representatives of such an ancient and respected civilization. They eagerly shared their research data, offered tours of their experimental facilities, and provided technical specifications for any technology the Valdorians wished to examine. What the delegation discovered defied every assumption about human society. The impossible technologies were not products of massive government programs or military-industrial complexes. They were created by university research teams, amateur scientists, and what humans called garage inventors. The probability drive that had baffled Imperial science teams had been built by a graduate student working on her thesis project. "We do not really understand why most of it works," admitted Dr. Martinez, the creator of the dark matter converter. "But that has never stopped us from trying new things. If an idea seems interesting, we build it and see what happens. Understanding can come later, after we figure out all the cool stuff we can do with it." This casual approach to reality warping technology was perhaps more terrifying than deliberate weapons development. The humans were not trying to threaten anyone or build an empire. They were just curious about how things worked and willing to experiment with concepts that other species considered impossible. The diplomatic mission returned to Imperial space with technology transfers that would advance Valdorian science by centuries, but also with the sobering knowledge that humanity was barely getting started. The projects they had witnessed were described as preliminary research for something far more ambitious. 6 months after the Prometheus had first appeared in Valdorian space, Emperor Valdos stood before the Imperial Senate to deliver a speech that would reshape galactic civilization. The assembled representatives of 3,000 star systems listened in stunned silence as their ruler formally acknowledged the end of the old order. "The galaxy has changed," he announced. "We can either adapt to that change or be swept aside by it. The Valdorian Empire hereby recognizes humanity as an equal partner in galactic affairs and formally requests admission to what they call the Galactic Research Cooperative." The vote was unanimous. For the first time in 5,000 years, the Empire had acknowledged another species as their technological superior. But as the session ended and delegates began discussing the implications, one question remained unanswered. If this was what humans could accomplish while casually puttering around with experimental technology, what would they build when they actually tried to create something impressive? The galaxy waited nervously to find out, while 12 billion humans continued their cheerful exploration of impossible ideas, blissfully unaware that they had accidentally conquered the universe through the simple expedient of refusing to accept that anything was impossible. In his private chambers, Emperor Valdos reviewed the latest intelligence reports from human space. Construction projects that spanned multiple star systems, energy signatures that suggested manipulation of fundamental forces, and references to something called Phase 2 that apparently involved really getting creative with reality. For the first time in his 2,000-year life, Emperor Valdos was genuinely excited about the future. It was terrifying,